Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Women's Health Tech Wednesday episode. I am your host for today. My name is Ansley Bowen, and I'm super excited to dive into today's content and speaker. Before we get started, I just wanted to run over a couple of quick announcements. We have our HitLab Innovator Summit coming up in December at the Microsoft Tech Center in Times Square. If you're interested in getting your tickets, please scan the QR code, and the link will also be in the chat as well. We also have our June symposium tomorrow, actually. So tickets are still available. They are free. It's a virtual webinar talking about beyond barriers, crafting the digital pathways to men's health. So if you're interested in that, please do also register with the QR code or the link in the chat. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest, Addie Diner, the co-founder and CEO of iFocus Health. iFocus Health was actually a previous BTA Challenge winner this spring. They won second place, so super excited to dive into more about iFocus and Addie. Addie, thank you so much for being with us today. If you could please do a quick introduction and background on yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and I love this event. I'm Adi Dainer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of iFocus Health. My background is in physics. I did hardware development, lasers, biotech, medical devices most of my career. And I changed direction in order to get data to the ADHD and mental health space. I believe healthcare should be about data, not opinions. And with all that's happening with ADHD these days, it's even more urgent.
Yeah, you're working in a different space, a very different space than you studied for your PhD. Do you feel like that you use any of your learnings from your PhD in your current role?
Yes, so I changed directions and along my career. This is the most extreme one, though. And I think what you learn, you take with you from many things you learn during a PhD are not necessarily related to science. So they are about planning your time, managing yourself, managing others many times, or leading others, analyzing data, understanding how to read a paper. And sometimes, and that was very important for me in this case, to be able to read papers, although I'm not an expert in psychiatry, but I can figure out what's known and what's not known, what's still questionable. And I think that's very important to understand.
Yeah, I love when I talk to people, and it's funny because a lot of people actually don't really do what they originally had planned to do, or they went into a specific degree area and they actually are doing something totally different. But it still, there seems to always be that type of connection that you bring with you throughout your next career. So I'm glad that you were able to still take your learnings and into what you do now. And kind of as a follow-up question to that, I feel like you're in a very male-dominated industry. So what challenges do you feel like you face as a woman when you are leading in this type of industry?
Yeah, so physics was a super male-dominated industry. Biotech is better in that sense. Still a long way to go. And I have to say, I'm happy to see in the audience some men as well, because women's health is not only about women. And specifically, this talk is, I'm a woman and I'm in healthcare. ADHD is about everyone. And we all need to be part of getting better healthcare for our population. Sorry for that tangent point.
No, I think it's super important.
So as a woman, you always there are many things, a lot of discussions about how women are viewed and the challenges. But I think one thing to understand is when someone seems out of place, whether it's if you see someone that looks very masculine doing something that you would think needs a lot of delicate abilities, or vice versa, you tend to ask more questions. What are they doing here? Are they really good enough? And you actually see it in data about how investors review pitch decks by women. They look more on the go-to-market and the team. And for male-led startups, they look more to ask. Those are the statistics. And they're consistent in reports over the last at least 4 or 5 years.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting that even just when it comes to like a pitch deck, that there are certain things that, investors or people will just automatically look at depending on the way that someone presents themselves. And I think I wanted to kind of go back to what you called was a tangent point, even though I don't think it is. I think it's a really great point because I was talking to you earlier and you made up a really great point about how men should be allies. We should want men to be allies for women's health because a lot of men are in leadership positions, like you said. And so it's great to be able to have those allies when it comes to women's health, even though it may be a male dominated industry. That way, women can really have their voice heard and hopefully get to a leadership position themselves. So I wanted to also to say that because I don't think it's a tangent point at all.
And I think it is, I don't like the separation, these are men's things and women's things.
Mhm.
Yes, there are, we need to learn that women's health is different than men's health, not only in the reproductive and hormone related items,
Right.
but I believe that most people in healthcare actually want better health for everyone, not only for themselves. And since women are half the population, that's part of everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of on the topic of being a female leader, how do you feel like you can help assert more of the presence in a traditionally male space?
Well, I think part of it is just uh, as we see more women, it's easier to to have more women come in.
Hmm.
Uh, so just being out there, and one thing I've been learning that even when I feel earlier on, definitely I felt I was just starting, and I still feel there's a long way to go. It affects other women, and other women see that as a possibility, and it makes it more accessible for more women.
Hmm.
So I really think it's important to be out there and to accept invitations like this one to talk and to put yourself out there, because it helps. If you would know, they say if you can't see it, you can't be it, right?
Right. Absolutely. And also, what personal experience have helped you that you perhaps you could pass on to some of our audience members as well that helped you navigate a male dominated professional environment?
So it's a lot of experiences, and it adds up. I realized I had two amazing grandmothers, a very different background and stories, but they were both very strong women and did not put themselves down. One of my grandmothers dropped out of school at 16 to support her family, and then she became a teacher and eventually an administrator and a leading administrator. Because she was self-taught, she got degrees through working, and she believes she can, right? So that's one example. So that's one side. The other thing that helped me is back in grad school, we started and this was a while back, and there was less awareness. And we started a group of women trying to support other women and learning more. And it's important to have discussion and learn about what's already out there, what's known, because there are lots of things that once you open your eyes, you can't unsee. But as you start seeing things, you realize we've been accepting things
Hmm.
that we shouldn't accept.
Yeah.
And
Seeing is
not
believing. I love that. Yeah.
not in a militant way. I'm not against men. I'm for men. I think understanding unconscious bias and how
Hmm.
it affects us, and it affects me regarding other women, other minorities, right? So understanding unconscious bias, I think, is very important for all of us. And that's the way to drive diversity, by understanding that I can choose my friends and I'll eat dinner and Friday night with people I feel comfortable with, and that's fine. I
Hmm.
don't need to look at diversity at my around my dinner, but that's not same as workplace. As a workplace benefits from diversity.
Right, absolutely. And talking about those experiences and stuff from your journey, I'm curious to know what led you to become an entrepreneur in the healthcare sector.
So I want to share actually something I didn't tell you in our preliminary discussions. Um, I live in the Bay Area in the past 11 years. And not long after I moved here, I was listening to this podcast or something on the radio, and they talk about innovative mindset, and that
Hmm.
some people keep coming up with ideas, and others. So that's kind of your mindset. And then I recall that I used to be that type of person. I used to keep having ideas, and I talked to my sister, who's one of my co-founders today, and we have a year and a half apart. And I told her that, and she says, "Yes, I remember. Right? It's not you. I remember that."
Mhm.
Uh, so I try to make a point to hold on to these ideas before, because your instinct is to cross them off, right? You start when you're younger, you have all these ideas and
Right.
dreams, and then you're like, "No, that's not going to work," and you cross them off before they come up. So
Mhm.
I started the practice of just keeping them in mind for a bit longer and exploring them a bit longer. I did cross most of them off eventually, uh, but I think that was the seed. Specifically, how I started iFocus, I was diagnosed with ADHD back in grad school doing my PhD. And a few years back, my kid was diagnosed.
Mhm.
And I didn't want them to go through the same challenges I went through.
Right.
And it really felt very lonely. It felt like getting the right treatment relied on figuring out what's right for me because there is no objective measures and you
Mhm.
don't know who to trust. And that started the exploration of how do we find a way to measure. I tried to find what's out there and I didn't find anything that answers the question. So eventually we came up with a solution.
I love that. I love when you look for an answer to your problem and you can't find it. So you're like, I'm going to create it myself. I think that is entrepreneurship at its finest. And I was actually going to talk to you about iFocus Health because, again, congratulations for being a second place winner at our BTA challenge in the spring. There was actually over 500 applications, and Addie's company iFocus Health was number two. So again, congratulations so much for that. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the inspiration and creation of iFocus. I know you covered it a little bit, and also what specific gaps in ADHD care does iFocus aim to address?
Yeah, so thank you. And that competition was great. I have to say for any entrepreneurs out there, it's not the first time we applied. Uh, Previous time we didn't pass the semifinals. This time we got on the way through. So keep trying, don't give up. And there were amazing companies. So I feel very privileged and grateful to have had this experience and have won. So about iFocus. So as I said, I was looking for data in this space. We realized that in developmental health and mental health, there's a big difference between diagnosing something and measuring progress. Because diagnosis is a lot about separate comorbidities and looking at medical history. You really need the human in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And when you measure progress, you really need to compare the person to themselves in tasks that really matter and affects everyday life. And it also has to be very easy. You can't, have a long, even a 20-minute task because that's not something people will do many times. Now you have to keep in mind that ADHD is very genetic. So most kids that have ADHD have at least one parent with
I was going to ask
ADHD.
that. Yeah, interesting.
So saying the parents will take care of it, no, that's not fair. That's not going to happen. And that's why we were looking for a way to measure progress. Now, with ADHD specifically, finding the right treatment and right medication is about titration, meaning there's over 30 different medications. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way to know if something works or to find the right treatment is you start from a low dose and you increase it until it works. How do you know it works? You ask the person, how was your concentration today?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as the president of one of the ADHD organization told me, we don't know we weren't concentrating, right? It's really hard to know. And that's an adult. How would a teenager know, right?
Right.
And then they throw it on teachers. And well, no, if elementary school teachers might have a sense, it's not fair to ask middle school and high school teachers that they have too many kids.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that is really important to say about ADHD, and I'm sorry, no, I'm not answering directly your question, but
No.
ADHD is not only about academic achievements. It affects many other aspects of life. Many people, even in the beginning, it's social and
Mm-hmm.
it's your self-worth. And it can drive, untreated ADHD can drive both mental health conditions as comorbidity, as well as substance abuse and other health issues. So anyone concerned with stimulant medication being addictive, you should know that the data shows that if someone has ADHD and they're treated with stimulant medication, they're less likely to have addiction issues in their life. So it's important to know that. And then last point, so I'm going back to iFocus. So what we're doing, we're measuring progress. And the way we're doing it is we're looking at reading processes, and reading is something that we all have to do, whether it's work or school.
Mm.
And we're looking using a webcam to look at the eyes and how our eyes move. And let
Mm.
me show you this quick video.
Yes, please.
So this is an example of the high school that has ADHD, and this is how they read without medication. The red dot is where their eyes are looking, and you can see how hard they're working. Right, they're going up and down the page. Now it's important to note this is a good reader. This is someone, if you would ask a test about comprehension, they'll probably ace the test. But
Mm.
see how hard they're working, how much
Right.
more effort they need to put into this. Now, this is the same person with the medication.
Much more smoother.
Much faster, much smoother, much less effort. So we're using this data from people reading to measure improvement. We're not diagnosing. Down the line, we hope we'll be able to screen, but right now we're concentrating on giving you a measure of much better you're doing compared to yourself, which
Wow.
means it doesn't matter if you have learning disabilities or what's your baseline of reading.
Hmm.
Our product is 13 and above at this point. It is free for patients. We charge clinicians, but it's free for patients. That's the important point for us to let people have control of their health.
I think that's so interesting that you showed that because you can really kind of understand what you're talking about with that eye tracking technology. And I'm sure that's something that is so hard for someone with ADHD to be able to describe. And they may not even think that it's necessarily odd in terms of how they read because they have no other comparison. So to be able to see that tracking and then see what it looks like when they have been given appropriate medication, that's amazing. I love that you thought of that and were able to implement that technology and algorithms to be able to do that. And it's also, like you said, there's no comparison to other people. It's just a comparison to themselves and how they, started off and then how they're doing now. And that's a great way to hopefully be able to understand and measure if the medication is working for them. So that's so interesting. I would never have thought about eye tracking technology before.
Thank you.
I also wanted to ask you too about the technology a little bit, and how does iFocus help to ensure accuracy and also reliability of its data-driven insights for ADHD treatment?
So our algorithm was developed based on a study we did
Mm-hmm.
with 100 participants. We actually saw an improvement for 90% of them.
Mm.
We're using AI, which is, a hype today, but basically what using AI means is we're not looking for a rule base. So ADHD is complex. It looks different for different people. It involves a lot of parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why um, we didn't want to say this is good, this is bad, this is the features. We're not researchers. We're not trying to say anything about how the brain works.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people working on that, but that's not what we're doing. So we developed the algorithm based on data, real data from people.
Mm-hmm.
We're also asking patients to report how they're feeling. How do you feel the medication is working for you? Are you feeling side effects?
Right.
And that's already better than one doctor gets, because when you go to the doctor, they ask you, how do you feel last week or last month? We're asking you, how do you feel now?
Right.
So when the doctor makes decisions, they have the iFocus score and they have your self-report and your side effects. And now you can have a discussion based on data.
Mm.
Eventually, today, the decision and in general should be based on what the patient feels, but you can at least look at that. And like one example with my own kid, they were happy with a relatively lower dose than what we expected.
Mm-hmm.
And then naturally you try to increase a bit more, and they said, no, it's the same. No, it was like half of what would be expected. And I don't know, it's hard to make a decision, right? Maybe they just don't want to deal with trying other doses.
Mm-hmm.
But the iFocus score said exactly the same as their feeling. So that just helped us not question him
Right.
and move forward. And the other side is like sometimes people don't know. Sometimes people are not sure if it works,
Right.
and that helps them. So that's a tool right now. We are doing more clinical studies to get a stronger quantitative validation for the
Hmm.
product. But what's interesting to learn as we talk to clinicians is the need is so big, the vacuum in this space is so big,
Yeah.
and not no, there's a shortage of mental health clinicians. So most people don't have access to experts.
Hmm.
And this way you can get better care, not relying on how your doctor asks the questions, how many questions they ask, how much time they have to do that. Doctors don't get reimbursed for emails.
Hmm.
So it's so hard to get good care if you don't go private, and it's even hard to get private
Right.
because there are long wait lists. So we help get an objective measure that doesn't take a lot of time, not from the patient, not from the doctor. The report is easy. It's like lab tests, not a long report. And then you can make decisions. Now, if it doesn't work, you'll look for the expert, but at least most people can actually get the treatment they need without that.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about what the response was like from healthcare providers and patients to your approach. And also as a follow-up question, I assume this can be all done virtually, so it doesn't have you don't have to actually go into a clinic or anything and do this, which also can help increase access. But yeah, I'm curious to know about the responses that you've received.
Yeah, I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. It's all good. They love it because we are not replacing their expertise in diagnosing.
Hmm.
We are, a doctor from Stanford told me families drive 3 hours to see me. By the time the kids get here, after 3 hours in traffic, I
Mm.
don't know how they're doing with their medication.
Right, right.
I can't read their mind what happened this morning at school. So we're not replacing doctors. We're trying to help scale their
Treatments.
abilities to the parts when patients are at home. And yes, this is virtual. You can do it from home. You can do it. My kid did it, at school during they get Chromebooks from school.
Hmm.
It's web based. You don't need to install anything. It takes 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So everyone could do it. The responses are really great. People are looking for this. People want this. It's needed. And with all the media and the issues right now with getting virtual care and making
Hmm.
sure the right people get the treatment they need, what's many times happened is makes it harder for everyone to get the treatment. And when that happens, usually the weaker populations suffer more
Right.
because if they have less access. And that drives me crazy, right? Because no, it shouldn't be like that.
No.
And
Mhm.
ADHD is a condition that 70% respond well to medication. Let's get these 70% the right medication
Right.
and avoid having them have comorbidities and get worse. And then you free your providers to care for the 30% that need maybe more complex care.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only does iFocus help increase that accessibility, like you were talking about, does it also help to contribute to reducing healthcare costs while still being able to improve those patient outcomes as well?
Yes, because you don't need as much follow-up. You don't need to because stimulants are controlled substances.
Hmm.
You're supposed to have a follow-up every 3 months.
Hmm.
You could automate the follow-up, and I can tell you this follow-up usually not doesn't bring much value because your pediatricians or PCP asks you how you're doing. You say okay, or you say you're not okay. Basically it's the same thing. You can say
Right.
I need to try something else. They don't have not the time or the education and the experience to do much with that. So if instead the patient gets a link to this test,
Hmm.
it takes the patients a few minutes, the doctor can see a report, everything is good. Or if it's not good, then they refer them to whoever needs to be referred, but that's much easier.
Right.
And even the titration process itself, instead of going back and forth and the patient is not sure, and long discussions and calls, that's expensive. Uh, and with the shortage of providers, what's nice is as I'm learning more, I realize it's a win-win both for patients, for clinicians, and for the health system in general.
Hmm.
Um, because we know doctor is looking for more work these days. Definitely
Right.
not people that have expertise in mental health. The wait lists are very long. So getting them to spend more time on people that need them more is more cost effective for them and for the system.
Absolutely. And I just realized that we're about 4 minutes away. So I have two more questions that I wanted to ask
Okay.
you about this because I think this is super interesting to kind of wrap this up conversation on. Can you discuss ADHD in the context of women's health? And how does it affect women differently? And what does that look like?
Yeah, so a few years back, we used to say men or the boys have much more ADHD than women or
Hmm.
than girls. Today, you know that's not the case. Girls tend to be more inattentive, so the dreamy type. I have to say, I don't know if that's inherent to the ADHD or to the way society expects us to behave. I know that's a whole different research topic. But many girls are diagnosed. Girls get diagnosed on average 4 years later than
Hmm.
boys. That's a study I saw. It feels like it's much more. Girls are more likely to get diagnosed with depression and anxiety
Hmm.
as a misdiagnosed, instead of getting diagnosed with ADHD. Um, and many women don't get, are diagnosed after their kids. Uh, ADHD increases your risk for postpartum depression
Hmm.
on top of other depression, and it's not recognized enough. So it's very important and then the last part is there is interaction between ADHD and hormones and how we react to stimulants and hormones
Hmm.
as well. So many women feel like they need a different dose throughout the month, but there's no data, and not enough data, and not the resolution to
Right.
measure it. So hopefully with iFocus, you could do that. You could say, look, I'm responding differently at different times of the month. And then when you hit menopause, that's a whole different story.
Oh, I'm sure.
And we know menopause affects your ability to concentrate, but
Mhm.
how it interacts with ADHD, there's absolutely no research there.
Oh, wow. So that would be a very interesting space to kind of dive into more about and to really see those relationships with. And hopefully we'll get there at some point in the future, the very near future. And we have 1 minute left. So I just wanted to wrap up with this question. How can people reach out to you? How can they find iFocus help if they are very interested in doing the eye tracking technology? What is the best way for them to reach out and be able to get this great technology?
So I put our website in the link. You can feel free to reach out on LinkedIn to me and in any other way. In the website, you can both get in touch with us. There's also a link to use the product. Yeah, and we're always happy to hear from people and discuss, talk with people. We say we have the best users because they're so committed to make this product a success.
Well, thank you so much, Addie, for joining us today and sharing all your insights on this. We've never had someone come on and talk about ADHD before, so this is super interesting for me, and I'm sure for our audience as well. There was a lot of great feedback in the chat as well. We did post Addie's LinkedIn in the chat, so please do reach out to her if you have any follow-up questions. And again, thank you so much for your time today, Addie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great discussion. Really enjoyed it.
I also just wanted to remind everybody to please join us next week for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesday session. I also wanted to thank our sponsors, FFF, Novo Nordisk, Merck, and Ellipsis Health for sponsoring these discussions. And one last huge shout out to Addie. Thank you again so much for taking the time today to come on our program. And thanks everyone in the audience, and hope to see you again next week. Have a great day.